Someone said you are the best mining analyst in the whole world. Do you agree with him?
I think some of the smartest people in Bitcoin are very, very young. And just because you're 50 or 60 doesn't mean you're smart or you have good ideas.
You showed President Trump to pay for a burger by using the Bitcoin Lightning Network.
Yeah, it was definitely a high-pressure situation. There have been many times when I've watched 50% of my net worth disappear in a day. But I think the only time that was scary... Like and subscribe.
Thanks very much for joining me here, Drew.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So you showed President Trump to pay for a burger by using the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and it was such a historic moment.
Hello, everybody. Slight technical difficulty.
All right. And fantastic, it went through.
All right, we're done.
Perfect.
The first transaction by a president on the Bitcoin protocol. History.
Congrats on your being part of it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was not me who set it up. It was Thomas, the founder of PubKey, who made that happen. But yes, I think it's a great moment for Bitcoin that the president, or at the time a presidential candidate of the United States, came to learn how to use that technology.
So do you have any interesting behind the scenes story to share with us? Like how did it all happen and how did you feel back then?
Yeah, it was definitely a high pressure situation. There were security guards everywhere to make sure that he was safe. And the entire day we basically were just waiting for him to arrive. They give a time when he's supposed to arrive, but you never really know. And I think the most surprising part was when he came, he stayed for much longer than we expected. I think we were only scheduled for around 5 minutes. So he would come in and buy the burgers and then he would leave. But when he saw so many people and so many reporters, he just wanted to talk with them. And so he took his time to answer some questions. And I was very impressed by how capable he is of thinking on his feet and speaking quite eloquently on his feet.
Lightning Network, I guess it's very popular among Bitcoiners. But for normal people, I guess most of them are more familiar with normal Bitcoin transactions. Don't really understand what it is. Could you please explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think of the Lightning Network as a layer on top of Bitcoin that facilitates much faster transaction settlement. Now, it doesn't have the same security assurances as Bitcoin does, but when users of Bitcoin effectively send Bitcoin to a certain type of transaction, in effect locking that Bitcoin so that it can then be used on the Lightning Network, it allows for a much faster flow of payments. And I think one way to better understand it is to think about the traditional banking system. Traditional banking settlement does not happen very fast, and it takes some time. So typically banks will batch many transactions and then settle them all together at slower increments. Now, for everyday users like us, we may want to use something like WeChat, or in the United States, Venmo or Cash App, which allows fast, nearly instant transfer of dollars between two users, but the actual settlement in the banking system takes much longer and only occurs when you batch many of those transactions into these larger settlements. And so I think that's one very important aspect of Bitcoin, is how, unlike other blockchains, Bitcoin is built in layers, where the base layer of Bitcoin is not used for every single purpose, but it's very good that it's kept in its simplicity so that it's very secure, very robust, and decentralized. And then for faster payments of smaller amounts, something like Lightning is very useful and very effective as a second layer on top of Bitcoin.
If we go back to the beginning of the story with Bitcoin, how did you first hear about it and how did you start to learn it by yourself?
Yeah, so I had just graduated college. I was working in investment banking here on Wall Street. And I'd heard about Bitcoin when I was in college and when I was in high school, but I never really took that much of an interest. But I hated my job in investment banking so much that I was reading about anything I could online, and I came across Bitcoin. This was 2017, so Bitcoin was going up at the time. and I went down the rabbit hole and sort of fell in love with just how beautiful of a technology it was, and became a Bitcoin maxi shortly after that. And I eventually ended up working in the space for a company called Galaxy Digital, where among other things we helped companies raise money, and eventually we started a mining business there. And so that would have been 2019 to 2021. And since 2021, I've been working in Bitcoin mining for a company called Cathedra Bitcoin, where I'm president and COO. So at first, Bitcoin was just an interest and an investment for me. And then as time went on, I shaped more and more of my life around Bitcoin.
In this year, you're just turning to 30, and now you're already president and CEO of Cathedral. It just feels like if it's in traditional finance, it will take people way much time to reach this kind of leadership role like yours. How do you think of it in terms of like the culture difference?
Well, I think the most fun part about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is that I think many people do not still fully understand it, and there are less sort of rules. I think some of the smartest people in Bitcoin are very, very young. And just because you're 50 or 60 doesn't mean you're smart or you have good ideas.
True.
And so I think that's the fun part about it, is that since no one really knows what they're doing, all you can do is think for yourself and do what you think makes sense. And you get a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise get in traditional industries. I should say we are a very small company. We're a small company publicly traded in Canada. But at the same time, it's been an amazing experience to be able to work with really capable people across the industry. But having this responsibility at a young age is definitely something I'm grateful for. I think in general, the best part about working in any new industry or any new space is the fact that the rules are yet to really be established. Mm-hmm. And so I think about Bitcoin mining over the last 6 years since I first got involved, and the way the industry works has completely changed in that time, as has the way we think about Bitcoin mining as a business and as an investment class.
So for me, I've noticed, but probably you doesn't feel this. I noticed that there are a lot of people, they bet on Bitcoin or on other crypto assets. Let's call them like gamblers. And those people, they are often the people who make the loudest noise online, and which will attract a lot of attention. And so like for people don't know crypto Bitcoin that much, like this is the first impression they will get. Bitcoin is just for gamblers, crypto is just for gamblers. But actually the real Bitcoiners that I know, like you, are actually people have like real passions, put a lot of hard work on this. What do you think the true Bitcoin community spirit is like?
That's a great question. I think a friend of mine named Kareem Helmy often talks about Bitcoin as sort of a back to the land movement. And I guess what I mean by that is Bitcoin, in my view and in the view of many others, Bitcoin is freedom money. And I think returning to Bitcoin in many respects, or saving in Bitcoin, is a way of not having to gamble, because you're investing in something that is provably scarce, that the number will go up over a long enough time horizon. And so you may not make the most money this week, you may not make the most money this month, but over time, that Bitcoin will go up. And so that's certainly my view, where many of my friends who say work in finance or tech here in New York, they love to day trade stocks, they love to think about, which tech company should I buy, or which pharmaceutical company should I buy. And for me, it's relieving to not have to think about that, because Bitcoin is the one bet that I understand most. I have a ton of conviction in Bitcoin over a 5, 10, 50-year time horizon. And so for me, it is a luxury to not feel stressed about the gambling, and just I can save in Bitcoin, this one asset that I know and trust. And I think that's very common with other Bitcoiners as well. And I think the way me and many of my friends in Bitcoin think about it is we effectively are buying Bitcoin for our grandkids, not for us. We're not looking to sell for a quick 10x or something like that, but we will hold as much as we can, and then ideally one day give it to our grandchildren so that they'll be much better off than us.
Historically, there are some downturns for Bitcoin price? Like, was there any like one moment you feel, okay, maybe that's the end?
No. I think there's certainly, there have been many times when I've watched 50% of my net worth disappear in a day. But I think the only time that was scary, or I mean the first couple times, you maybe freak out a little bit and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm losing so much money. But when you think about things in a Bitcoin denominated way, it doesn't really stress you out as much.
Really?
I think
like
so.
you can still falling asleep well?
I think about things in terms of, Bitcoin. So if the price goes down, I can buy more. If the price goes up, then I have more, paper money. But either way, I wouldn't really sell. But I think with the one time that was scary, and it took me, this is a few years after I bought my first Bitcoin, and definitely there were times where I was quite nervous before then. But I grew quite comfortable with it. In March 2020, when COVID was hitting the entire world and Bitcoin was crashing, it crashed down from $5,000 US to 3,900, or I think the lowest it got was 3,600 US dollars in a matter of minutes. And it's because there was a large exchange with a lot of leverage that was liquidating a lot of positions, and so the Bitcoin chart was just tanking, and so that was it was scary, I would say, but it was scary in a sense of you're watching a horror movie and you're like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. This is crazy. But at no point did my conviction long term that Bitcoin is going to be one of the most important technologies in human history, at no point did that change.
You were born and raised in America?
Correct.
I read a report, can't remember the exact number, but there are more than 10% of Americans holding Bitcoin. In real life, when you're speaking to people, do you feel the number is accurate?
Yeah, so I definitely have a limited sense of people just because I don't interact with everyone. I live in New York, but I think 10% feels right. Certainly, almost all of my friends and everyone I know, the vast majority of them have Bitcoin, but a lot of that is because all of my normal friends that did not, we call them normie friends. All my normie friends, they probably own Bitcoin because I've been annoying them and nagging them about Bitcoin for the last few years. But I think 10% is probably right, and I think it's always surprising when you meet some people, you talk with them for a little bit, and it turns out that they do own a little bit of Bitcoin, and I think it's becoming much more normalized now in the U.S., where I think many folks are told that they should have at least a little bit of Bitcoin just in case, and I think that's complete change. I think when I was first getting into Bitcoin, you were crazy if you held Bitcoin, but I think now it's very normal to hold Bitcoin, so no finance or investor will get fired for buying Bitcoin, whereas you definitely would have years ago.
You had a background in Wall Street, and I wonder, normal finance people in Wall Street, in general, what's their perspective on Bitcoin? Or did some people working in tech, do you feel most of them understand what it is, or we're still in a very early stage, even those people, they don't really understand what it is?
I think most of them understand what it is at this point at a very high level. They understand that it's scarce and like gold. I think that's what most of them think. It's digital gold still, which is fine. That's close enough. But I think whether most of them own it, I think a lot of them probably don't, because they've probably heard about it for a while, and they probably, if they had bought it and got into it, they probably would have left those jobs at a certain point. But now they're still in those jobs. So maybe some of them still have some, but I think many of them are bitter that they didn't buy. And so many of them can be quite, in English we have the expression salty. They're a little bit annoyed and peeved that they didn't buy when they thought about buying. So I think there's probably a mix, but I would say most understand it at a high level. I would say most probably don't own a meaningful amount in those traditional finance jobs. Tech might be a little bit different, but yeah, definitely in traditional finance.
Mining is a very crucial part in the Bitcoin network, but I don't know if it's just me. In the Bitcoin industry, the spotlight doesn't shine on mining that much from a Bitcoin holder perspective. Like normal Bitcoin holders, they don't have the interest or have the motivation to learn that much about mining. Could you please explain like why mining is very important in the whole Bitcoin network?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think mining is really important because it's what gives Bitcoin its settlement insurances, and I think that's one of the most important aspects of Bitcoin. And I think unlike other types of cryptocurrency or blockchains where you use proof of stake, which doesn't really require real world infrastructure, I think mining is a large reason why Bitcoin is so robust and so resilient, and why I personally think it's by far the most important digital asset and really the most important asset in the world. So I think to highlight exactly why Bitcoin mining is so important for the robustness of the network, I should say, it's because it requires real world infrastructure. It requires transformers and substations and constant use of power. Currently the Bitcoin network uses something like 20 gigawatts worth of power, which is call it 2 New York cities worth of electricity. And so it uses an insane amount of power. And the fact that that power is used all over the world in many different countries, and that anyone can opt into that the network if they want to, makes it very difficult to control or for someone to attack Bitcoin. It's not the most important thing, or perhaps miners oftentimes don't really understand how Bitcoin works. So there are many other aspects of the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin network that I think that are tremendously important as well. But mining and Bitcoin's proof of work mechanism, I think, is one of the most unique and it is certainly one of the most fascinating to think about.
Someone who used to be a Bitcoin analyst said you are the best mining analyst in the whole world. Do you agree with him?
I don't. I think I can think of many analysts who are better than myself. Most of my writing about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in particular has maybe been too philosophical. I like to examine the philosophical aspect of Bitcoin mining, but I can think of several amazing mining analysts who understand the industry and the technology incredibly well, far better than myself.
Okay, name one person.
I think
just in case you're being too humble.
I think give 3 names.
Okay.
I would say Brandon Bailey with Second Gate Advisors is a great mining analyst. I would say Penny Ether, who does a lot of work looking at some of the public companies here in the United States. He's a very good mining analyst. And I would also say there's a gentleman by the name of Gigi who's also an excellent mining analyst, both in terms of the companies and the corporate miners, but also with a deep understanding of the protocol, which I think is super important because, at least here in the United States, as Bitcoin and digital assets become more corporate, you have a lot of boomers or old people come in who understand business and finance, but maybe don't understand the technology as much. So I think it's very important that people, as they learn more about Bitcoin, continue to really try to understand the protocol, to try to understand how the network works, because otherwise your understanding of what it is you're dealing with is incomplete. And I think the more I've learned about Bitcoin, the less doubts I have about Bitcoin. I'm not nearly as worried about the price movement now as I was when I first got into it. And the main reason is because I understand it so much better now that certain things just feel inevitable to me.
In the beginning, like there were not many miners, but now like it's a very competitive industry now.
Yeah, it's extremely competitive. I think with Bitcoin mining, the way I've always thought about it, it is a permissionless energy sink, meaning anyone in the world with extra or low cost energy that might otherwise be wasted or underused can always be used to mine Bitcoin and create revenue in Bitcoin by doing so. And so as a result, you see Bitcoin mining tend to go to places with the cheapest electricity, with electricity that might otherwise be wasted, whether that's stranded power assets, maybe like oil and gas wells with extra natural gas, whether it's solar and wind farms that maybe have extra electricity that's not being used, or even in the United States, you see many Bitcoin mines located on the grid where they can trade their power effectively because they're agreeing to buy a fixed amount of power. They can either sell that power to the grid or they can use it to mine Bitcoin. And so I think Bitcoin is a really transformative technology for the energy industry as a whole. And so I think as Bitcoin mining as we sort of evolve, as Bitcoin grows, Bitcoin mining will saturate more and more parts of the energy sector, and the more it does that, the harder Bitcoin will be to control, because more and more folks will be mining in more and more places. I don't think my views have changed on that as much in the last, call it 5 to 6 years, but over that time, I've had more and more an appreciation for the difficulties often associated with Bitcoin mining.